Hey everybody, welcome to Unit 2, Assignment number 5, Commerce and Culture 500 to 1500. This evening you'll be looking at reading pages 343 through 335 and completing questions 21 through 27. And if that seems like a lot, she thinks that too. Questions or definitions I'd like you to look for are on page 343, testify, which is provide as evidence, and there can be no evidence if you burn it. Fulcrum, which is a central role also on 343. The central role was, from this dinosaur falling on the ground, was certainly the uppercut that was landed, not the little body shots. But, alright, I gotta get that off. Next is unparalleled, which means has no equal on page 344. And with regards to cuteness, this little fella is unparalleled. I will catch you back here. I'm sorry, there's one more. Multitude on 345, which means a large number of something. And why anybody would go in here to be ripped around like this, but there clearly are many people. At least they're wearing pink. So there is a large number there. Anyways, I will catch you back on 343 for some question support. Weaving the web of an Indian Ocean world. The world of an Indian Ocean commerce was long in the making, dating back to the time of first civilizations. Seaborne trade via the Persian Gulf between ancient Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley civilization is reflected in archaeological finds in both places. Some scholars believe that the still undeciphered Indian writing system may have been stimulated by Sumerian cuneiform. The ancient Egyptians and later the Phoenicians likewise traded down the Red Sea, exchanging their manufactured goods for gold, ivory, frankincense, and slaves from the coast of Ethiopia, Somalia, and southern Arabia. These ventures mostly hugged the coast and took place over short distances. An exception was Malay sailors. Speaking Austronesian languages, they jumped off from the islands of present-day Indonesia during the first millennium BCE and made their way in double outrigger canoes across thousands of miles of open ocean to the East African island of Madagascar. There, they introduced their language and their crops. Those food crops, bananas, coconuts, and cocoyams, soon spread to the mainland, where they greatly enriched the diets of African peoples. Also spread to the mainland was a Malayo-Polynesian xylophone, which is still played in parts of Africa today. So, question number 21. Why were the Malay sailors speaking Austronesian languages an exception? Stop and think and respond. Yeah, that's exactly right. Their travel to Madagascar through the Indian Ocean was far from a short distance, especially in a canoe. Continuing on, page 343. The tempo of Indian Ocean commerce picked up in the era of classical civilizations during the early centuries of the Common Era, as mariners learned how to ride the monsoons. Merchants from the Roman Empire, mostly Greeks, Syrians, and Jews, established settlements in southern India and along the East African coast. The introduction of Christianity into both Ethiopia and Kerala in southern India testifies, and highlight that word, testifies, to the long-term cultural impact of that trade. In the eastern Indian Ocean and the South China Sea, Chinese and Southeast Asian merchants likewise generated a growing commerce, and by 100 Chinese traders had reached India. The fulcrum, and highlight that word, fulcrum, of this growing commercial network lay in India itself, its ports bulged with goods from both west and east, as illustrated in the snapshot. Its merchants were in touch with Southeast Asia by the 1st century, and settled communities of Indian traders appeared throughout the Indian Ocean basin and as far away as Alexandria in Egypt. Indian cultural practices such as Hinduism and Buddhism, as well as South Asian political ideas, began to take root in Southeast Asia. Question number 22. What was the fulcrum of this growing commercial network which laid in India? Stop and think and respond. Yeah, that's right. The fulcrum, again, central role, was India, because they had goods that were from both east and west. Continuing on, page 344. In the era of third-wave civilizations between 500 and 1500, two major processes changed the landscape of the Afro-Eurasian world and wove the web of Indian Ocean exchange even more densely than before. One was the economic and political revival of China, some 4 centuries after the collapse of the Han Dynasty. Especially during the Tang and Song dynasties, China reestablished an effective and unified state which actively encouraged maritime trade. Furthermore, the impressive growth of the Chinese economy sent Chinese products pouring into the circuits of Indian Ocean commerce, while providing a vast and attractive market for Indian and Southeast Asian goods. Chinese technological innovations, such as larger ships and the magnetic compass, likewise added to the momentum of commercial growth. A second transformation in the world of Indian Ocean commerce involved the sudden rise of Islam in the 7th century of the Common Era and its subsequent spread across much of the Afro-Eurasian world. Unlike Confucian culture, which was quite suspicious of merchants, Islam was friendly to the commercial life. The Prophet Muhammad himself had been a trader. The creation of an Arab empire stretching from the Atlantic Ocean through the Mediterranean basin and all the way to India brought together in a single political system an immense range of economies and cultural traditions, and provided a vast arena for the energies of Muslim traders. Question 23. What two major processes changed the landscape of the Afro-Eurasian world? And there were one per paragraph in what we just covered. So stop and think and respond. Yeah, that's exactly right. The first was that China reestablished themselves as a unified state, encouraging trade. And the second is that Islam was friendly to traders in the commercial life. Those are the two. All right, continuing on, page 344. Those energies greatly intensified commercial activity in the Indian Ocean basin in many ways. Middle Eastern gold and silver flowed into southern India to purchase pepper, pearls, textiles, and gemstones. Muslim merchants and sailors, as well as Jews and Christians living within the Islamic world, established communities of traders from East Africa to the southern China coast. The efforts to reclaim wasteland in Mesopotamia to produce sugar and dates for export stimulated a slave trade from East Africa, which landed thousands of Africans in southern Iraq to work on plantations and in salt mines under horrendous conditions. A massive 15-year revolt among these slaves badly disrupted the Islamic Abbasid Empire, which it was brutally crushed. Beyond these specific outcomes, the expansion of Islam gave rise to an international maritime culture by 1000, shared by individuals living in the widely separated port cities around the Indian Ocean. The immense prestige, power, and prosperity of the Islamic world stimulated widespread conversion, which in turn facilitated commercial transactions. Even those who did not convert to Islam, such as Buddhist rulers in Burma, nonetheless regarded it as commercially useful to assume Muslim names. Thus, was created a maritime Silk Road, a commercial and informational network of unparalleled, and highlight that word, unparalleled, proportions. After 1000, the culture of this network was increasingly Islamic. Sea roads as a catalyst for change, Southeast Asia and Srivijaya. Oceanic commerce transformed all of its participants in one way or another, but nowhere more so than in Southeast Asia and East Africa, at opposite ends of the Indian Ocean network. In both regions, trade stimulated political change as ambitious, or inspiring rulers used the wealth derived from commerce to construct larger and more centrally governed states or cities. Both areas likewise experienced cultural change as local people were attracted to foreign religious ideas from Hindu, Buddhist, or Islamic sources. As on the Silk Roads, trade was a conduit of culture. Located between the major civilizations of China and India, Southeast Asia was situated by geography to play an important role in the evolving world of Indian Ocean commerce. When Malay sailors, long active in the waters around Southeast Asia, opened an all-sea route between India and China through the Straits of Malacca around 350 of the Common Era, the many small ports along the Malay Peninsula and the coast of Sumatra began to compete intensely to attract the growing number of traders and travelers making their way through the straits. From this competition emerged the Malay kingdom of Srivijaya, which dominated this critical choke point of Indian Ocean trade from 670 to 1025? A number of factors. Srivijaya's plentiful supply of gold, its access to the source of highly sought-after spices, such as cloves, nutmeg, and mace, and the taxes levied on passing ships, provided resources to attract supporters, to fund an embryonic bureaucracy, and to create the military and naval forces that brought some security to the area. All right, question 24. How did Islam differ from Confucian culture in their view of merchants? Stop and think and respond. Didn't we just answer this one? Weird. Yeah, it was different in that they were very supportive of merchants, mainly because the Prophet Muhammad was, in fact, a trader. Essentially the same answer for 23. 25 then. Where is Southeast Asia located? Stop and think and respond. Yeah, that's right. It is southeast of Asia, but essentially it's between India and China. Question 26. Why were the Malay sailors an important part to Indian Ocean commerce in 350 of the Common Era? Stop and think and respond. Yeah, that's exactly right. They opened up that all-sea route, which made that trade between India and China easier to happen. Of course, helped their development as well. And question 27. What were 4 significant factors which led the Malay Kingdom to dominate Indian Ocean trade? Stop and think and respond. Yeah, that's right. This is a long one, so make sure you're highlighting. They had a lot of gold. They had access to spices. They levied taxes on ships. And then that in turn created security for military and naval forces. Continuing on, page 345, the last paragraph of this assignment. Although I'm sure you're not going to follow along since the questions are done, but hopefully you do. Srivijaya monarchs drew upon local beliefs that chiefs possessed magical powers and were responsible for the prosperity of their people. But they also made use of imported Indian political ideas and Buddhist religious concepts, which had been brought to the area by a multitude, and highlight that word multitude, of Indian merchants and teachers. Some Indians were employed as advisors, clerks, or officials to Srivijaya rulers who began to assign Sanskrit titles to their subordinates. The capital city of Palembang was a cosmopolitan place, where even the parrots were said to speak 4 languages. Buddhism in particular provided a higher level of magic for rulers as well as prestige of association with Indian civilization. These rulers sponsored the creation of images of the Buddha and various bodhisattvas whose faces resembled those of deceased kings and were inscribed with traditional curses against anyone who would destroy them. Srivijaya grew into the major center of Buddhist observance and teaching, attracting thousands of monks and students from throughout the Buddhist world. The 7th century Chinese monk Yi Ching was so impressed that he advised Buddhist monks headed for India to study first in Srivijaya for several years. And that's it, kiddos. We'll see you back in class tomorrow. Have a great night. Bye-bye.